Are we ready? We'll start in a few minutes. Are we ready? Okay, here we go. Good morning, colleagues, stakeholders, and students. A warm welcome from the Department of Commercial Accounting in partnership with Risk Insights. We bring you this exciting public lecture named The Role of ESG in Africa, Connecting the Value Chain for Impact. A special welcome to our Executive Dean of the College of Business Economics, Prof. Tonkiso Malloy, and our Director of the School of Accounting, Prof. Ben Marks. Thank you so much for always supporting the Department of Commercial Accounting with our endeavours. We want to welcome our online audience comprising of various stakeholders, including Risk Insights subscribers across South Africa, Africa, and around the world. A special welcome to our colleagues of the Department of Commercial Accounting that cannot be here in person due to teaching responsibilities on the Soweto campus. And then a huge welcome to our keynote speaker, soon to be Dr. Anushka Bogdanov. Welcome, Anushka. It's an absolute privilege to have you here. She's accompanied by her husband, Mr. Andrei Bogdanov, the CEO of Risk Insights, and then Anushka is also the founder and the chair and director of Risk Insights. They are joined with their team, Veronica and Katja. Thank you very much for being here with us this morning. I know that you left early to be with us, to join us. Right. Before we dive into this very important matter, we as the Department of Commercial Accounting would like to tell you more of who we are. We are based on the Soweto campus, and we want to show you this short video.
Sanibonani, Tobela, Dumelai. My name is Vitumelo Kuzwayo, and I'm the head of department at the Department of Commercial Accounting. The Department of Commercial Accounting is one of two departments within the School of Accounting, which is housed within the College of Business and Economics. We are based at the Soweto campus, which is resident to almost 5 million residents within the heart of Johannesburg. We are also down the road from Southern Africa's largest hospital, which is Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital. Our vision at the Department of Commercial Accounting is to develop critical thinkers, thought leaders, and different makers. Our staff complement includes passionate and competent staff. Our key strategic objectives include teaching and learning, research, and community engagement, and a key thread amongst all of these objectives is social impact as well as innovation. At the Department of Commercial Accounting, we offer a flagship qualification, which is the Diploma in Accountancy. This is a qualification for entry-level accountants or as well as accounting technicians. Part of our qualification is to create leaders in our field. We attract students who are self-driven, have hope for a brighter future for themselves as well as generations to come. A large cohort of our students that we attract are first-generation students within their families. That means they are the first ones to actually go to university. A key component of our qualification is to ensure that we equip our students with the following: critical thinking, As part of our key strategic focus, we look at research. One of the things that we love to do within the Department of Commercial Accounting is make sure that we contribute to the scholarship of teaching and learning in the 4 main disciplines that we teach. And this includes financial accounting, financial management, management accounting, auditing, as well as taxation. And this includes within the private as well as the public sector. As a Department of Commercial Accounting, we understand the need to perform multidisciplinary research. One of the important factors that we take into account within the Department of Commercial Accounting is ensuring that we maintain as well as create relationships with stakeholders. This includes people within industry, professional bodies, as well as internal UJ stakeholders. We have strong partnerships with the following stakeholders: the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, also known as ACCA, the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, also known as SAICA, as well as the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, also known as CIMA. We also have a few relationships with IIA, the Institute of Internal Auditors, as well as the South African Institute of Tax, also known as SITE. Our qualification offers exemptions with some of these professional bodies. As part of our future projects within the Department of Commercial Accounting, we are working hard in order to develop postgraduate qualifications, as well as short learning programs, including continuous education programs. Over and above the current diploma in accountancy that we offer, we currently offer short learning programs to people who work within industry. As a team, we are also looking to develop postgraduate qualifications that cater to people within the industry as well as people with undergraduate qualifications. The Department of Commercial Accounting boasts a lot of success stories. Our staff, as well as students, have been recipients of multiple awards, including the Mail and Guardian Top 200 South Africans, SAICA's Top 35 Under 35, academic awards within ABASA, CIMA, IIA, as well as our staff who have obtained postgraduate qualifications, including PhDs. In 2024, the Department of Commercial Accounting conferred its first honorary doctorate on Nonkululeko Gobodo. She is the first Black female South African to become a chartered accountant in South Africa, and this happened in 1987. Within her career, she then founded what is now known to be SNG Grant Thornton, one of the big 5 auditing firms within South Africa. We look forward to engaging you as you walk through the corridors at our Soweto campus as students and stakeholders. Thank you.
The University of Johannesburg, our future reimagined.
Okay, that's us. Under the leadership of our HOD, Ms. Butumile Kuzwayo. Okay, here we go. I'm back on. Right. Now I would like to call to the podium Prof. Tankise Malloy, our Executive Dean of the College of Business and Economics, to address us. While Prof. Tankise is coming up, he's an overachiever by excellence. Fresh news is that Prof. Malloy recently passed his APC exam, and among so many other qualifications and designations, he's now also a chartered accountant. Prof. Malloy.
It's a setup. I was told that I'm here to eat and not say anything. Then I pass by, I don't see any breakfast. And now I have to speak. Colleagues, good morning. I hope you're all well. Dr. Anushka, I know her as Dr. Anushka, so because I know that she has a PhD in international finance and financial mathematics. We actually come a long way, Dr. Anushka and I, but I just didn't know that she was invited here. Anyway, thank you, Ms. Kuzwayo, for the invitation. Prof. Ben, thank you for facilitating the event. Prof. Ahmed, the leadership of the school. of accounting. So I've also seen Prof. Aita, the director of the School of Economics, and the former HOD, Ms. Lula Mapois. Thank you so much for making accounting fashionable, but also a leader in thought leadership. So UJ celebrates 20 years of its existence. So I'm just happy that you saw it fit to invite Dr. Anushka to share with us. So as UJ celebrates its 20 years. So we always say that at UJ, when we teach using the future perfect tense. So that's how we teach. That's why when we talk about this UJ reimagined or reimagining the future. So we always argue that we are in this business, the business of reimagining the future. Now, time for confession. So I'm conflicted, of course. I know Dr. Anushka. When I worked for Anglo in 2008 as a chief accountant, she had handed me, she was the head of credit risk at DBSA. I accepted the offer when I got to Anglo. I told them that I was leaving, and then I had to reverse walk back that decision. So she was trying to call and call and call. I was no longer answering the calls because I now had a tough time. So we met a couple of times, Doc, afterwards, discussing risk management and the stuff that you were doing in the Northern Cape. And also then I must also say that when I was doing my PhD, because my PhD was in corporate governance and then credit risk, I reached out to her to get some interviews with the people at the DBSA, but also Standard Bank, ABSA, and all the other top banks, and she referred me to a couple of people that I got to interview, and I got some sensitive data, of course, that I had to de-identify and work on it. So that was just the time of confession, just to say that I know Dr. Anushka. So Prof. Ben and Ms. Kuzwayo, thank you for making this reunion possible. So So I can now only say that, Doc, our paths were meant to cross again, so we're meeting again. So, Doc, thank you for agreeing to share your wisdom with us. ESGs are becoming a top priority to consumers, investors, and policymakers, as ESGs play an important role in most investment decisions. So the topic you have chosen is so important as we've assumed the G20 presidency. So then as South Africa, and as we've positioned ourselves for this G20, so we've selected a theme, so that's why Americans, call us, we're pushing the day. So we've selected the theme solidarity, equality, and sustainability. So that's what we'll be driving as part of our G20 presidency. So the president is clear, so that the things that we'll be elevating, so which is what you're talking about, today, ESGs, the things that we'll be pushing, so as South Africa, so is disaster resilience and response. The reason for that is that we believe that if there is disaster, so then developing countries get to be affected more because of resources. We would also be pushing for debt sustainability for low-income countries in the G20. We'll be pushing for the mobilization of finance for just energy transition, so which is crucial, so in the ESG process. We'll also be pushing for harnessing of critical minerals for inclusive growth and sustainable development. So these are things that South Africa has put forward in its G20 presidency. But, whilst I'm sitting here, so I'm inviting each and every one of you, if you can participate and contribute. So what Business Unit South Africa has done is that they've put in the portal out there, then asking experts to be part of this G20. So as I close, Dr. Anushka, so then we are looking forward to your insights on the matters of priority today, or matters of priority in our time, we are also looking forward to this relationship that the Department of Commercial Accountancy has started. We're looking forward to it evolving and then becoming a relationship that will benefit the university but also benefit you. Welcome to you, Jay. We're looking forward to have further collaborations with you. Thank you, colleagues.
Thanks very much, Prof. Tankiso. Right, to give context, towards the end of last year, the Department of Commercial Accounting signed a MOU with Risk Insights. I want to use this opportunity to acknowledge the key players in establishing this exciting partnership from the UJ side. It is from our Professor of Practice, Alta Prinsloo, our own, Ms. Mari Janse van Rensburg, our previous HOD, Ms. Lulama Boyce, and our current HOD, Ms. Boitumelo Kuzwayo. So, and this is a very exciting day. This marks our first event within this partnership. And there are lots to come. We have, it's going to be a very exciting space. So we're up and running and we look forward and we will share in due time. But now, more about our keynote speaker, Dr. Anushka Bogdanov. Right, I'm going to read it because I'm so scared I'm going to forget something. It's really impressive. Anushka Bogdanov is the founder and chair of Risk Insights. She's a risk management expert with over 30 years of experience and has held senior roles in investment, corporate, retail, and development finance. She has received numerous global accolades for excellence in risk management and was recognized as a new champion for the ESG GPS model by the World Economic Forum in 2021. Anushka has been instrumental in pioneering Africa's first AI-driven ESG data mining tool tailored for the African continent, contributing significantly to sustainable finance innovation. She has co-authored research in green banking and ESG, lectured and supervised postgraduate students, and developed SHE risk management models aligned with Basel regulations. Risk Insights received numerous accolades for the pioneering and innovative work that they do. Risk Insights is also the first female-owned data provider for Africa, specifically with a focus on ESG. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Dr. Anushka Bogdanov.
That's fine. Yeah, I'm good. Jeeves, good morning. I feel so privileged to be here today. And thank you very much for the warm welcome, Tankiso. I'm going to say Professor Tankiso, that's amazing to actually be with you here today, as well as with the UJ team. And very, very proud to be here with Boitumelo and her team from the Commercial Accounting Department and the Dean, and to all the distinguished guests that have made the time for me today. I really appreciate it. I actually was not expecting anyone to be here today because, after Donald Trump said that, there's no ESG and there's no climate change and, there's no DEI and we should roll back on all of this. So I was expecting all of you to just say, there's no ESG presentation today. So I really, really thank you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and before I start, and to give you a little bit of perspective of why I chose the ESG journey for Africa. So I was born in a very patriarchal system where men made the decisions, and even if you were a smarter woman, you were just You were not allowed to speak about politics, you were not allowed to speak about mathematics or anything like that, because I came from a very humble background. And, but it was very, very patriotic. And during that time, and it was during the apartheid time, so here you had, your minority within a minority, and on top of that, you've got your own family dynamics, which is very, very patriarchal. And whenever I spoke about math, or I've spoken about data when I was young, my father would say to me, the world is built for average people. And he didn't know about standard deviation, right? so he would talk about, the world is built for average people, so why do you always have to, look at things differently? And then I realized I was an outlier, and, we were basically looking at the world from my world from a different pair of eyes. But also, during that time when I was growing up in this apartheid era, which is gone now, thank God for that, I was in a car explosion. And I was in a car explosion during a time when there were curfews, and it was 8 o'clock at night, and my dad was driving this car, and you were not allowed in this particular area, which was a white area at the time. And this car exploded, and I was inside with my brother, and we were then rescued and taken to a hospital. And if those of you that remember the apartheid time, so you had different hospitals for different people, right? Different color people. So the nearest hospital was St. Aidan's. And I got to St. Aidan's, and I was a little kid. And I was allowed to get to St. Aidan's, but stay outside of St. Aidan's because you were not allowed inside the hospital. Actually, it wasn't St. Aidan's, it was Addington Hospital. Pardon me. And you were not allowed inside the hospital because of color. And so I was on this gurney with my grandma and my brother, and I was little, and I couldn't understand, I'm in all of this pain. And because of color, I was not allowed in. And eventually, I was rushed to R.K. Khan's hospital, which was in Chatsworth, and it was an Indian hospital. And I spent many, many, many months in hospital. And after 19 operations, I survived, right? And I'm here today. And so it kind of stuck in my mind. And I was little, but because my parents didn't teach me about apartheid, and they didn't tell me about black or white and why you were sitting outside in this hospital. And, but it kind of gave me something to think about. And as I grew older, and I finished university, and Mandela was released, and I got to work at Absa Bank. And apartheid was abolished, and South Africa had entered into the global world, and sanctions was lifted. And I was then responsible for setting up limits for the bank to deal with international trade. And we set up the first bank out of Africa in London, Absa London. And I was very instrumental with Dr. Steve Boyson at the time, setting up all the limits. And he was not the CEO of the bank at the time. And it was really, really a great experience. But what was interesting was how we were viewed as South Africa and entering into the global world. And I was mesmerized because I was young, and I was thinking, oh, wow, we are part of something that's so big. And this is like over 30 years ago. And it framed me, because every time there was a Euro money course or anything that needed to be learned on from risk management, because we were learning to trade and do business abroad, I was sent as this young girl from Absa Bank to go and train. And then I'd train in London or New York, and I'd come back and I would train others because it would be cheaper. So, you train the rest of the staff and the analyst. And Fitch International noticed me. And I was at one of the training courses, and Fitch appointed me as an analyst, a senior analyst responsible for emerging economies, including South Africa. So I was working for this rating agency. And I got to see the world, almost 80 different countries and banks. And what I could see was financial inclusion. So I could see banks that actually did great things, how the economies were functioning. And I could see banks that didn't do great things, how the economies were basically not malfunctioning, but the inclusivity in the financial system. And it wasn't about black or white. We had the black and white issue in South Africa. But what I could see was that if you had these great products and you were able to give access to finance, what people could do and what would happen with progress and innovation. And I was mesmerized with this and I got to work in New York and London and all over the world with major CEOs of major banks, sitting and interviewing them and talking about their financial risk modeling, their financial risk positions of banks, and they were the hearts of economies. And I thought, wow, this is just really amazing. And I got to do really good work with Fitch International, and I got to then move to Nedbank. And when I got to Nedbank, it was very interesting for me because at the time, Nedbank was if you speak to Nedbank, it's completely transformed today, right? It was a lily-white bank when I got there. And I thought this is interesting, so I've got to do things that are very, very brave in terms of changing. And at the time, the Financial Services Charter was introduced, right? And that meant that Nedbank would have to look at, and all the banks would have to look at the financial inclusion. So I got to work on the affordable housing model. So bringing Nedbank retail, investment banking, and corporate banking together to meet its financial targets. And I'm going to come to ESG in a few minutes, so don't be bored with me. So I worked through this process, and I was so excited because Old Mutual approved this affordable housing strategy. And I said, well, I put strategy together. So I'm going to make housing available for South Africa. And I was so disappointed because I was told, you have a great skill set. You're going to be working as the head of analytics for Nedbank Retail, but you're not going to be working on affordable housing because that's a very small portfolio. So what I realized was, and Nedbank didn't say this, but what I realized was that good skill sets that were needed to uplift were not being really looked at in the highest risk portfolios, because affordable housing would be a high risk portfolio, and the People's Bank portfolio had failed, and that was the data that was used to build affordable housing models in the bank and as well as the banking sector. So I felt I was not giving my true self. So I worked for over 4.5 years at Nedbank, and I loved it. But I felt inside of me, I wasn't doing anything for the country. I wasn't making a difference. I was driving profitability, of course. It was a great career. But what was not happening was I couldn't see that impetus of lots of people getting affordable housing, access to finance. And I thought I needed to serve my country. I needed to go and give back some way. And I was fortunate because one of the Nedbank executives, and who I hold very close to my heart, Mr. Paul Baloy, had been appointed as the CEO of DBSA. And I put my hand up and I said, I want to go to DBSA and I'm going to serve the country. And most people at Nedbank thought I was just crazy, right? Because I was going to take a cut in my salary. I was in investment banking. You're making all of this money, and you got a cool parking space because you're going to park with all the great people at the bank. And I was in my early 30s, and I got to DBSA. And what was great about this institution was that it was looking at infrastructure change, right? It was looking at creating projects and financing projects that will make a difference to the country. And I loved it. And what I did was I created the first inverse relationship between risk and return. And to date, DBSA is one of the best run SOEs in the country. And analytics was introduced into DBSA. And I created this model which had the inverse relationship between risk and return. So the higher the risk, the lower the return. And it was really great working for the institution. But I felt that as the institution started progressing and they were making lots of money, they were not looking at that inverse relationship anymore. So it started becoming commercial. And I thought, well, okay, then I can just go and work back at a bank, right? So what's the difference here, right? Yes, the municipal lending was still very much the inverse relationship, but the rest of the projects were still, they were competing with banks instead of crowding out the market with bringing in the banks to take over projects. They were actually competing and becoming part of the system. And I thought, this is not really what I came in for. So 4.5 years later, I left DBSA. And I started my own company. But I, as a small business, so it again showed me something different. Because as an SME, nobody was giving me even the time of the day, because I'm a small business. And who are you? Like, yes, you know some math, you can do some models. But in South Africa, we don't give business to small companies. We give business to big companies. You must have a big brand. You must be, you must know who, we need to see you all over the place. And I used to go to some meetings where I would sit and wait in, some of these people worked for me at some point, but I would wait in meeting rooms. They will change the meeting. And I thought, wow, look at this, SMEs. So if you want progress in a country, you want to make sure your SMEs are the driving force of a country. And if you've got good skill sets, you've got to move that skill set. And I realized that those things are going to be very, very difficult to do in the country. So I would just have to do what I need to do to make ends meet. And I was a single mom. And what happened was, in 2000, and I started building models. So almost every bank has some model that has been built by Risk Insights. And in 2017, something very, very interesting happened. One of the major asset managers came to the Risk Insights, and we're working with major banks across the globe. And they said, we have Reg 28, and it means that we can increase our investments into our foreign investments. Can you re-look at our alpha calculation and look at our risk thresholds and our risk methodology? So as I was doing this, there was a blip on this asset manager's portfolio, which was BP. And I looked at this and I said to the team, this is so interesting. It doesn't make a major difference in terms of the returns. But this company has BP on the portfolio and it has a major slump. We need to analyze this. So I start analyzing it. And as I analyze it, I pick up that the Deepwater Horizon crisis, right? I was really sheer coincidence because I'm no ESG expert, and yes, I'm busy with my doctorate in terms of ESG. So I look at this and I think, let's start investigating. And as we investigate, we pick up there were social issues that caused after the Deepwater Horizon crisis, and then of course the environmental carnage, which created an $850 billion fine for this institution, and it obviously created the share price to fall. But what was interesting for me was that in South Africa, we were not paying attention to it. We didn't pay attention to environmental risk, right? We had a lot of, because we're a resource-based country, we're a resource-based continent, and we were not taking into account if there is environmental carnage, what can happen to a company, and do we have the financial resources to actually deal or cushion those type of penalties. So I started researching it, and I said to the team, there's this thing that I've come across, which is called ESG. And I went across to see Professor Mervyn King, and he'll tell you this. He was here a few months ago also presenting. I went to see Professor Mervyn King, and I said, Prof, what is this about ESG? Like, what do you think about it? And he said, yeah, it's like a big thing across the globe, and it's something that, we are all looking at. But South Africa, we haven't gone into any of the detail. And I came back to the office and I said, it's going to be the next big thing in terms of governance because I need to research it. So I say to the team, we are no longer going to be looking at bank risk modeling. We're going to be doing ESG modeling because this is going to be very, very important in terms of the expected loss calculations for banks. And if somebody in South Africa or the regulatory system is not looking at it, it's going to affect the heart of the economy, and most importantly, it's going to impact mines. So we take a cooling off period. I bootstrap the company, and I say we're going to build an ESG model, and I thought it would be so easy. Thank you. And wasn't easy. Firstly, there were 500, at the time there were 200 frameworks, right? Now there are 500 frameworks. There were 200 frameworks, right? And I thought, okay, so how are we going to, and we've been building regression models all our lives, right? So how are we going to do this? So these 200 frameworks started with PRI, UNI, Paris Agreement, TCFD, GRI, WEF metrics, SDG goals. I mean, there were just, an alphabet of this. And I thought, how are we going to analyze 200 frameworks? So I said to the team, we'll have to use machine learning and AI to do this. And it was so new at the time, right? So we took all the frameworks and I started looking for an algorithm. How can I analyze these frameworks using an algorithm? And what I found was Google came up with an algorithm called TF-IDF. You use it today, all of you. Use it on your phone. It's predictive texting. So when you're typing out your text message, pulls out a whole lot of words, predictive words, and then you complete your sentence. But if you look at the logarithm of this, it allows you, I didn't create it, I just innovated this algorithm, right? So if you look at the logarithm of it, it doesn't only give you the predictive text, it gives you the frequency of the word, it gives you the context of the word, as well as 5 lines up, 5 lines down on a paragraph. So I said, okay, so we take all of these frameworks and we push it through this algorithm. So we push it through the algorithm and it allowed us to see what are the most frequent words that are used in these different frameworks, right? So we looked at the interoperability of these frameworks, which today in the world, we'll come to S1 and S2 and regulations, but today in the world, those frameworks allowed us to see which variables were being spoken about. I'm trying to take that complexity and make that very, very simple in terms of what we did, right? So we could see every framework, what was the most important words or the most frequent words, and there was a whole lot. And then we went through another process where we started cleaning and mining and wrangling this. And what we found was the words like carbon emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, waste management, and hazardous waste, and they were cutting across these frameworks, right? And we said, okay, so now we know what variables to look for, right? So we found over 390 variables. Women on the board, gender diversity, youth, and so forth, right? And then we said, okay, now let's find which companies we can push this through. So we take these variables and push it through an algorithm. And we said, okay, which companies? So we started looking at all the stock exchanges. And what we found was that the Johannesburg Stock Exchange was the only stock exchange in the world that had integrated reporting as a listing requirement. And because of that, there was non-financial data that was made available. And that was because of the apartheid regime and because of the FTSE for Good index and because social data was being collected, but some of the environmental data because the mining companies, the basic resource sector, needed to have certain things because of the DMR codes as well as the environmental regulations in South Africa. And we said, boom, we have an exchange that we can use. So we took the 300, over 300 companies at the time in 2018, and we pushed it through this algorithm. And when we did that, we were able to pick up every chairman or any integrated sustainability, voluntary, mandatory, and publicly disclosed information of every issuer in the country, what they were doing regarding non-financial disclosure regarding ESG. Based on these 200 frameworks that were available at the time. So the team were very, very happy. They were saying, we've got all of this data. And I said, you have nothing, right? You have nothing. What you have to do now is to look at what does this data, does this narrative, because today that is part of the S1 narrative in the regulations through the IFRS. We said, now you need to find the actual metric related to this narrative, so these words. And we use computer engineering to pinpoint data. Now, it seems so easy. It isn't, because data is reported in tables, they're reported in PhD documents, in HTML files, into infograms, into pictures. So you've got to now take all of that and start breaking it down to give you this information. And it took us almost a year and a half to get this. And for the first time in the history of the world, there was a company in South Africa that had all the data, homogeneous data, independent data, consistent data of the entire country's non-financial information in one place, and you were able to compare information like for like. So we had all of this information. So the team said, oh, we have a model. I said, that's not a model. So we now need to prove if this information is actually important for asset managers, for issuers, and the regulators, because there needs to be a relationship between this data and financial reporting, financial performance. So we started testing different variables. So we started testing the return on equity, the return on assets, and the relationship with this non-financial data, gearing ratios, revenue streams, and Z-scores, and so forth and so forth. And what we found was the only thing that could give us a relationship between ESG data and financial performance was the change in market cap, share price, and PE ratios, which are all functions of each other. So over a long-run average or a central tendency, the market capitalization of companies, irrespective of small cap, large cap, or a mid cap, actually improve over a long-run average, over a period of time, if their non-financial data is better. So transparency and governance creates better market cap performance. And boom, we had a model. And we created a model then to say companies that had good disclosure had a rating of a 4, and companies that had poor disclosure had a rating of 1. And we were able to track that over the market performance from 2018 right up to 2021, where we completed building the model in 2020, from 2017 to 2020. I got sick towards the end of 2020, and basically stepped down from Risk Insights, and Andre and the team took over the company and basically scaled up the model into the rest of Africa. And today, we are in 9 countries in Africa within a space of 3 years. And what is important out of this is that you could see what digital transformation could do, right? So to give you a sense of this, Standard & Poor's is one of the largest ESG data companies in the world, and they have about 17,000, maybe now 20,000 companies that they rate over a 15 to 17-year period with over hundreds of analysts. Risk Insights had over 20 analysts. Within a space of 3 years, were able to become the largest ESG data provider in the world for Africa. So they have just over 1,000 ESG ratings of the 2,000 issuers on the continent, in the most difficult continent to actually gather data. Because it's easy to gather data where data is available, right? Where data is difficult to gather and to structure is extremely difficult. So that was really, really good to do. But that's not why I did this model. The model was built and created because as I went through the process of research and working through ESG, I found that Africa had the lowest carbon footprint in the world, right? And just a second. And I was looking at, how do I make a difference? Because I also was really, really ill. I'm in remission now, which I got about 14 months ago. But at the time, I was looking at, how do I create a difference on the continent by using this great data that we have? And I then picked up, well, you have this 4% carbon emissions, and everyone complains about Eskom, everyone complains about Sasol, right? Because they say, these are the 2 largest emitters in the world. They're lying. They're the largest emitters on the continent, true, but they're not the largest emitters in the world. So if you take Eskom and you were to compare Eskom to a company that is in Texas or in many parts of other developed worlds, Eskom's carbon emissions will be lower, right? Because if you got 4% of the world's carbon emissions, where's the rest, right? So mathematically, you would be better, right? If you look at, yes, Eskom is the largest emitter on the continent, right? But it is not in the world. So we have an advantage. So how do we use this advantage effectively? And how we use that advantage effectively is about using the data to ensure that those countries in the world that actually caused the carbon emissions to increase, and how did those carbon emissions increase, was because of, and it's not because of bad behavior, it was the era we were living in. People like to say that something bad happened. There were good things that happened to us during that era because we entered into the Industrial Revolution over 100 years ago, right? And during that time, and we had a few things that framed us. One was technology, two was industrialization, manufacturing of goods and services, three was becoming really driving capitalism in terms of ensuring that GDP was being increased, so we were all becoming competitive, and we were becoming global because our products and services were going across the world, right? So what we were developing in terms of gold and diamonds and platinum and all the wonderful resources that we had allowed for other countries to use to become technologically more advanced, and we had products and services, which allowed us today we have democratization of goods and services, so we have access to it, right? It was part of the global world, which was part of the Industrial Revolution. But of course, with that came a whole lot of negative stuff, and the negative stuff was the environment was abused, right? Because we were not taking care of our planet. And then we were not taking care of our people across the globe because we're all workaholics. We're all saying, okay, we need to work 24/7, make sure we're on this rat race, including myself, right? Because I said, when I started building models, I wanted to build because of capitalism, right? Because the more money you have, the better it is for you. The more things you have, the more you have to show, you look better, right? So it was all part of where we were, and it was developed by the theory of GDP that came about by Simon Kuznets, who basically framed the Bretton Woods system that said GDP will be our measure of looking at productivity and efficiency within an economy and wealth creation. So, and later on, you know, some of you might have heard of the Kuznets curse, where Simon Kuznets basically said we need to look at the well-being of people, we need to look at the planet. But people stopped, you know, listening to him because everyone was looking at wealth creation, right? It was like extremely important. So I thought by using Risk Insights tool, we would be able to ensure we start framing Africa, because Africa is the poorest continent. Secondly, we have youth, we have youthful population, everyone's looking for this, and we have all of these resources. So it doesn't mean that because we have entered into stakeholder capitalism out of shareholder capitalism, and everyone thinks that we haven't, we have. So it doesn't matter what Mr. Trump has said. I'm not here to, you know, I'm not a politician, but what I can say to you is that there is climate change. We have seen the climate change. I never saw Johannesburg have snow in November, right? Unless all of you have seen it. I've been 50 years. I'm 53, gee, I forget how old I am. So, you know, I've been I'm 53 years old. I've never heard of snow in Johannesburg. I've never seen some of the climate events take place across the globe. And these are really, really important pieces that we need to know that this climate change is there. There's catastrophic events taking place in different parts of the world. We can see that the amplitude, the frequency, as well as the impact that it's having on communities. And irrespective of whether you're looking at different data points, you are seeing that is increasing across the globe over this last 20 years. We've seen it. I think there's a chart, not that one. It's right at the beginning. It shows you, no, that's the market cap performance. Sorry, it's at the beginning. It shows you a graph that gives you. Go next. I'll find it for you. You can go next. No. That shows you the stability of the model. I want to just show you this. Next. Yeah, there we go. So, you know, irrespective of where and what you're looking at, you can see that climate change is taking place, right? And the amount of droughts, floods, and over this last, from 1970 right up to 2024, You can see it, right? And I got this from our partners, Fusion Asset Management, and it's very interesting to see the patterns in terms of extreme weather conditions. If you go to the next slide, which shows you, so these are from various data sources, and you can see the tracking of the climate, the temperature rise is exactly the same. It follows the same pattern, and we can see the temperature is increasing. So something is causing it, right? So something is causing it, whether it's a hyperbole effect, whether it is, because of carbon emissions, but it's happening. And because it's happening, why it's happening, I'm not a climatologist, but it's happening. And because it's happening, we need to be prepared in Africa. We need to be prepared in South Africa, which means that if we have this low carbon footprint, we need to attract investments, as well as continue what we're doing, but capture carbon, as well as look at how we can deepen our capital markets, increase technology to be able to become more greener, but also ensure that we still drive economic performance. And it's a very difficult balancing act. It's a very, very difficult balancing act. So there's one theory to say that if we, we concentrate on climate change and on carbon emissions, then we won't be able to do business, which would mean that there would be high employment rates, businesses will go out of business, it will impact the GDP, it will impact the continent at large, which already is, having major political instability together with unemployment and other social inactivity that is creating problems for the continent. So how do we do this in a way that is going to actually make sense for Africa? It would mean that the data is going to be very critical. So by taking the data and by showing our data amongst the asset managers and the issuers, it means that our carbon emissions, our data can be used to basically raise capital in the international markets, because we have the ability to show that we were low carbon emitter because of poverty, one. Two, because our minerals are critical for technology and for changes that need to occur across the globe, as well as for productivity. So we are a formidable force in the world globally, as well as we play a very pivotal role in terms of what needs to take place for Africa. So I really believe that using our data, Risk Insights data, we would be able to raise capital, we would be able to deepen the capital markets, ensure that companies that want to offset their carbon, where they have very high carbon emitters, use Africa to increase their investment, so M&A activity can increase, which means that we could change the trajectory of Africa for the first time in the history of the world. And most people say to me that I'm mad, right? And when I sit with regulators and standard setters, they had never known that in Africa we actually have the data for listed issuers, right? A lot of them have been saying that you can use proxy data. Why would I want to use proxy data of high carbon emitters? You want to use your low carbon information to show that this is where you are. But of course, a lot of companies believe that if you have this information, which is non-financial information, it will give you a see-through into the company. Of course it will, because it will show you not only the financial performance of the company, but it will show you the culture of the company. It will show you how the company is taking inclusivity, how it's taking financial performance into its inclusivity, and vice versa, how it's looking at financial materiality through climate change, how to protect the environment, double materiality in terms of taking into account society as well as its people that it has employed in the company. It will take into account governance structures which will be very different from the governance structures that we understand of today. So governance and the accounting profession that teaches governance quite extensively will be impacted by non-financial data. Now, there are many billionaires across the globe that believe that you do not need to show your ESG data, because if I'm doing something great, I'm doing it, so why do I need to show it? But the same thing then applies about why do you need to show your financial information, right? I'm doing great things. I don't need to give it to an accountant. I don't need to give it to the taxman. I don't need to show it to anyone. Just invest in my company because I'm telling you that I'm doing great things, right? So it's about, taking responsibility and being accountable and being conscious. And that is what I want to leave you. I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail about so many different aspects of ESG, but this is just at a very high level why I embarked on this journey to ensure that our company could make a difference to Africa and make a difference to the country. But more importantly, I'm really, really grateful for this partnership that we have in collaboration with UJ, and for recognizing Andre and the team at Risk Insights for doing the work that they're doing and making a difference to the country, making a difference to the continent through accounting, which is extremely important for the profession, and through the SLDP program, which we are setting up, which will probably be announced. If I've done that out of hand, please, pardon me in advance. But there's an SLDP program that I really strongly encourage senior leadership and leadership across the country as well as the continent to take up, which will look at the formation of ESG over a period of time, the history of it, looking at Milton Friedman's era of shareholder value creation and how Wall Street was built, and then moving into stakeholder value creation where we all matter, and how difficult it is, because even at home, if we are brothers and sisters, we don't want to have all of us mattering. We're already fighting amongst ourselves. So you can only imagine when we have to take the whole world into account, how we're going to fight. It's already started. You can see it every day in the news. It will give you a sense of that. It will also give you a sense of all the different frameworks across the globe and why these frameworks are important, because eventually you will have one standard, you'll have one regulation, because you can't have multiple because of comparability of information. So this course will take that into account in terms of the frameworks, and it will take into account the regulations from IFRS S1, S2, CSRD, CBAM, IFRAG regulations, the SEC regulations, where the KPIs of CEOs, we're taking into account some of the environmental data. And then it will also look at the E variables, the S variables, and the G variables, how they impact different sectors based on materiality and proportionality. And then lastly, it will also take into account carbon counting. So how do you use your carbon? How do you count it? How do you use your carbon credits to optimize your balance sheet and your financial position going forward? So it connects that value chain, which I think will be quite interesting amongst all the professors that will be lecturing this, together with international institutions that will be also sharing their views on this as well as their knowledge. So with that, I think I don't want to bore you anymore. I think you're going to have a lot on ESG that will be coming through in the world, and I hope that we are not discouraged on ESG, and we do the right things. And what is right matters to all of us, because we live in a global world. We live amongst, today Andre and I can walk around together as husband and wife, and we are both, I'm Indian and he's white. 30 years or 35 years ago, we couldn't do that. And I lived through various decades within South Africa and the changes, and we've changed for the better. And we only have hope, and if we don't have hope, then you have nothing. And I can tell you that I've come through quite a bit, and I've come out strong on the other end. And that's because of great leadership in the country. So we moved past race a long time ago. We like to think we are still looking at race, but we've moved past it so long time ago, and that allows all of us to be sitting here together as professionals, as students, as executives of the University of Johannesburg, because I remember in the early 1990s, I could not study at Witwatersrand because there was a tripartite system of education. And today, all of us are here together, educating, prospering, and innovating for progress. And I hope that is what you hold high at your heart and keep it close, because ESG is not about thinking with your head. ESG is about thinking with your heart and your head. So thank you for that.
Thanks so much, Dr. Anushka. She's a true trailblazer, pioneering innovative change on the forefront of, especially in our accounting profession. So this is an exciting time to partner with you. Thank you very much. It's now time for questions. I don't know, we'll take questions now from the room. Okay. Right. Prof. Ahmed?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anushka, for that presentation. I'm Prof. Ahmed from the Department of Accountancy. Quick question, and maybe it's a technical question, but you raised it in your observations. So we've seen ESG in research coming through in banks' ECL computations. So those are being factored in indirectly. But what we're not seeing is, and I'd like your insight into this, is those ESG considerations coming into other financial reporting aspects. So in research is showing that actually very little is present in impairment models. Very little seems to be in other provisions. And I just wanted your thought around that connectivity. What is missing there? What can be done to get that connection, or to make that connection?
Thank you. I think there's a couple things in terms of the ECL calculations currently. Firstly, there's no Basel regulations on environmental aspects being brought into the expected loss calculations for banks currently. So it's not a regulation. So they will have to look at it from an economic capital perspective rather than a reg capital perspective. So what we've seen is that there has been minimal use of, well, a lot of the banks have been trying to gather their own data, right? And one of the biggest issues in gathering your own data is that you need to ensure that you have proper validation, right? So the proper validation means that if you are saying that the probability of default, or the expected loss calculation, is the probability of, those of you that don't know, probability of default multiplied by the loss given default multiplied by the exposure of default, which is where you are on the amortization curve, right? Which will give you what is your loss that you will suffer because of a default. So environmental risk, if you are gathering that data yourself and you're validating it yourself, it would mean the regulator is not looking at it currently, so the regulator is not giving you any oversight, right? So what has been done in the past on expected loss calculations is the probability of default has always been a standard definition. So 30 days is in arrears, 60 days you in arrears, 90 days you in default. 180 days, you are a non-performing loan. So being able to do that allowed credit rating agencies to actually do the expected default frequency of an event. Now, what also happened, so the credit rating agencies provided that data, which was very important because it was an overarching governance that banks needed to take into account. And that's how the 3 rating agencies became so famous in the world, right? Fitch, Moody's, and what's that? Standard & Poor's, right? Now you have MSCI and a whole lot of others. But the probability of sustainable, not sustainable has not been defined, because the causality of this risk, of environmental risk, has not been, no one in the world has solved it as yet. We have all looked at elements. So what I showed you was correlation between financial performance. But that financial performance, I could see it in terms of change in market cap, share price, and PE ratio, but I can't tell you what actual factor within that E, S, and G, But I've done that research now. So it hasn't been published. I'm going through my Viva in a few weeks' time, right? So and I did it on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, but I'll give you a little bit of preview. From my data, what I'm seeing is the S factor does not create financial performance, does not increase financial performance. And that was a little bit of a sad thing for me, right? But I had to be independent and I had to look at it fairly. So the S factor doesn't show you that if you have more diverse people, like so if you have, if you have more women on the board or you have more women employed in a company, it's actually going to improve your financial performance. It's a combination of the S factors that actually give you that lift in terms of the numbers. That's what I saw. So, so banks have not really looked at that. And one of the things is that they've been building their own in-house models with no validation, right? And for the credit data, you had one, the rating agencies, and two, you had Experian, ITC, and what is the other one? I can't remember. But they were providing also the default data for retail bank. So that also so banks are trying to do it on their own, and because they're not getting all the data that they need, the homogeneous data, it's not being factored properly at the moment into the expected loss calculations. They are trying to do that. We have partnered with a company called Fusion Asset Management in London, and they are working with the Basel Committee on a few papers in terms of looking at that expected loss calculation being factored using environmental risk and social risk as a weighting into the ESG. But of course, there's a lot of pushback because it's going to impact on capital adequacy and make banking a bit more expensive, right? I hope that answers your question.
I mean, just a question. I mean, all your researchers and your models are based on published data and other reports, but sometimes those data might not be reliable because companies can do window dress, we've seen with ESG, etc. So how do you solve that problem?
So remember, companies that have a lot of resources signal to the market all kinds of nonsense, right? So 100% correct. So signaling theory, as you know, is used quite extensively to show that, you know, I want to build my reputation and my credibility. So what is interesting about Risk Insights model is when we were building the model, we solved for that because we took into account sentiment. So a rating can change of multiple times in a year. So for example, and I'll give you an example, and please, Sassel, everything is based on public information, so do not kill me. So when we were rating Sassel, for example, in the early, when we built the model initially in 2018, 2019, we gave Sassel a very poor rating based on the signaling. The data was actually very good. If you take the Sassel financial state integrated report and sustainability report, they have almost everything they report on, exactly what you're saying. But what we picked up was the sentiment in terms of all the news feeds that were coming through on Sassel across the globe as well as in Africa, which basically lowered that rating because it was put as a weighting into our model. And that's one way of solving for it, but it's not 100%. Our data is a 98% accuracy in terms of what we gather, publicly, mandatory, and voluntary, and then we take into account the sentiment. But there is there will be that error, a little bit of a margin of error for it, but that's the only way to get around it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to give Prof. Aitan, he's had his hand up. Second, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm one of the, I think, last people to register. I was told by, thanks to Boitumelo and Ulam, who said that I should actually attend this public lecture and I will not regret.
I hope you didn't regret.
I am not regretting. I think when I came here, I thought, okay, maybe we are going to look at ESG, debit and credit, but when you started, I heard you talking about all this algorithm, machine learning, and I think some things that are related to a large language model, and you also started talking about Kuznets, the theory of Kuznets, and then I was wondering whether I am in the financial or economics public lecture. So it was really exciting, and like I said, I'm not regretting. And I was more interested in when you were, it's just a clarification, when you were talking about using proxies. Like one should not use proxies. In economics, because of our data and so
Assumptions.
we try to use quite a number of proxies in order to model our relationship between variables. So when you say one should not use proxies, I thought it's just a clarification. But overall, I must say, it is really very, very good public lecture where even if you are not from the field, you are able to follow. And I think it is an indication that when we attend public lectures like this, it's an opportunity to also develop interdisciplinary research. So, yes.
Thank you. So I think when I was saying don't use proxy data, I'm talking about, well, in building research, you will always have different assumptions that you are using, right? But when I'm saying don't use proxy data, I'm saying don't use, a proxy data of an institution that is sitting internationally, because all the rating agencies across the world have different rating methodologies, right? And because nobody is solving for sustainable, not sustainable, because it's a huge project that will need to be done over a period of probably the next 10 to 15 years before they can actually say which company is more sustainable than another, right? But we all have to do the right things. But so a lot of the standard setters, instead of using the Africa data, they're proposing to use proxy data. So you will be using data that has higher carbon emissions in any event by default, because if you've got the lowest default in the country, on the continent, sorry, if we have the lowest carbon emissions by default on the continent, in the world as a continent, then that would mean our data is much lower in terms of carbon emissions versus a company, if we have to look at Sheen, let's take an example, Sheen versus Mr. Price. Why would I want to use Sheen data? I'll use Mr. Price data because Mr. Price data will show me lower carbon emissions. So by Mr. Price showing it, and I'm just using public entities, I'm not picking on anyone, yeah? So if I use Mr. Price, it will be much better in terms of modeling, and my expected loss will be lower. And that would mean it will impact also on my sovereign rating, it will impact on a whole lot of aspects in terms of my credit rating for the sovereign as well, because ultimately it will all be pulled back into, where we are as Africa or where we are as South Africa. So we have some really good things in South Africa. We have great governance structures. Some of it is faulty and we have some issues, like everybody else, but neither does countries that hold hegemonies of the world. We can't say that their governance is great. So, we must take credit for what we have, like the data. We have data, we must take credit for what we have. If we're saying that we have, youth that are younger, why would I want to use old people when I'm modeling, right? I want to use the youth that I have on the continent is lower. So why would I use the proxy data of older people in other parts of the world, in other developed countries? So just to give you a sense of that, our data would set us apart by default.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Right, I think let's 1, 2, and 3. Right, and then we'll take questions from the online audience as well.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for the lecture. It was very insightful. So my question is just based on the product that you pioneered, the ESG GPS. I just wanted to ask, I understand that it uses gap analysis and then it makes recommendation improvements. What I want to know is that how then does it integrate those improvements with the company strategies in alignment towards financial performance?
So companies have to set up their stewardship. So what the model does is it gives you what is your baseline reporting currently, right? So are you reporting your environmental, your natural capital variables like energy usage, energy consumption, renewable energy, water discharge, your recycling of water, how much of hazardous waste, non-hazardous waste you have, e-waste you have, and so forth, right? So, and the variables that we use will cut across. It doesn't matter where you're sitting in the world. Those variables will cut across any company if you're looking at, but from a materiality perspective, some will be more important than others, right? So once you have that information as well as your social factors in terms of the over, so I've just looked at the main ones, right? There's like over, I think 70 to 80 variables from an aspect. Do you have women on the board? Do you have women working in your company? How old are your youth? People that are working, millennials, Gen Zs, baby boomers, and so forth, right? How many board meetings you have on, is ESG part of your board, and so forth. How many committee meetings you have, your governance structures, and so forth. And then it gives you a rag in terms of your red, amber, green, in terms of where you are and what you're doing, and then actually showing your empirical data and how it compares against your peer group. Once you have that, then you've got to set your financial strategy as well as your economic strategy as well as your business strategy based on this data, because you might want to decide and say, I want to be the way I am. I don't care, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? You can continue doing the way you're doing things the way it is. But what is important is to say, what will this competitive piece be? So then you need to start stress testing your cash flows. So for example, if you look and you see that you don't have renewable energy, right? And now I need to, as a company, I can see all my competitors and my peer group are all going into renewable resources. It means that I will have to spend OPEX on this as well as CAPEX on this, and I will have to retrain people, I will have to collect data differently, I will have to do things differently from a business transformation perspective. All of that costs money. So that means my cash flows need to be stress tested, my OPEX has to be stress tested, as well as my financial position of the company, and then looking at how it will perform over a period of time. So that's what it will do for you, right?
Or can I continue? Thanks for the presentation. Thank you for the presentation sounds in the Rambo in the jungle, Rambo in the jungle. So I wanted to check in regard to the sustainable development gems, the gross education monitoring system. I think education sustainable development number 4 was another variable which was going to be considered for the MVPs, mechanics of variable proposition. So also I'm keen to understand, as we are heading towards local elections next year. So do you think also the SDGs can be calculated for the NHI implementation as after the government enacting this NHI? So that with regard to the methodologies of variable picking. I'm interested in those MVPs.
I don't.
Variable proposition for the environment also, would the mines continue to comply as we are considering to the target of the decreasing of the temperature, 1.8 degrees Celsius, I think.
I don't think, thank you for the question. I don't think I'm qualified to answer that. So I'm going to be honest, but because I don't know much about how the whole NHI, I have not researched. I would be not to be doing justice to your question. So I don't know exactly what components have been used in the NHI calculation, but what I can say to you is that the SDG goals are to ensure that you have access as human beings and as people of all countries. So the 17 SDG goals were created by Kofi Annan through the United Nations and the Paris Agreement to ensure that we have access to basic resources, we have access to education, we create equality, we are recognizing gender and so forth, and we have access to also medical facilities, so part of basic human rights. How that will feed, it's part of the SDG goals, but my model doesn't look at specifically the NHI, yeah? Thank you.
Thank you. Then a last question on this side, yes?
basically tell you exposures in terms of capital or otherwise, will be exposed to floods, droughts, etc. And loads of few examples. S&P has created that tool and is selling them to corporates. We have Moody's as well that have created that tool and is selling them to corporates. And I think it's quite exciting to hear about an African country, company that has started to provide solutions to some of these things. And I want to hear from you if you're playing in that field of selling location data and providing tools that provide information about the likelihood of droughts, etc., and floods, and how they affect exposures that banks, for example, will have. So that's the first question. And then the second question is on the cautioning against the use of benchmarks. So what we're doing in banking now is that we're doing research on climate pathways, climate scenarios, as you know, IEA, NGFS, all of them, and we're trying to see which scenarios to be best suited for banking needs, right? So I want to hear from you why you caution against the use of such benchmarks and what the alternative we should look at.
Thank you very much. A very interesting and very intricate question. So firstly, rating agencies across the world have different rating methodologies, right? No methodology. So you can't compare Standard & Poor's to Moody's, Moody's to Risk Insights to EcoVadis to MSCI, right? So everyone has a different methodology. Risk Insights methodology is very, very transparent because we don't work with the company. So we don't go to, hypothetically, Standard Bank. I don't know which bank you are with, but Standard Bank, right? So we don't go to Standard Bank and say, Standard Bank, let's have a look at your data. Because I worked in a rating agency. So remember, and that's what the audit profession has also, suffered fooled on. Because when you are auditing or you are rating an institution, the minute you start talking to that institution and you start advising as an auditor, you conflict yourself. When you are a rating agency and the minute you start interviewing and you're getting paid for that, you conflict yourself. And that's why we had the financial crisis of 2007, right? The RMBS, in terms of the different ratings that were given to different asset classes, was because most of these rating agencies had major relationships with a lot of the institutions that bought the paper, right? Or they were selling the paper too, so either way, buy or sell side. So Risk Insights took a very, very different view of how we would do things based on all our experience. And we have, Andre and the team that are very, very smart in terms of knowing all the different risk paths, right, of an institution. And we said, we don't want to engage with you because the minute we engage with you, we will start helping you greenwash, right? The minute I talk to you about your rating and say how you're going to improve your rating, so I don't do any advisory work. So that's where the money is, right? I don't do any of the advisory work. Everyone wants me to come in, tell them what to do. Nope. Because the minute we do that, or Andre or the team do that, we will conflict ourselves. So and that's the difference between us and, so yes, all the different pathways, we have various products. So ESG GPS is the main product, and then you have various ancillary products, which is called Vision, where you can basically drag and drop your divisor. So what a lot of the rating agencies do is they create one divisor for your intensity calculation. So they show great intensity, right? So if I take your carbon emission and put it over employees, I can see that per head, this is, if you got lots of employees, it looks low, right? But if you, or I have lots of revenue, I'll put it over my revenue number. But if I put the same number over all my peer groups and I drag and drop that divisor to different levels, you will see different risk profiles, right? So that's one. The other thing that we did was we created, so that's the Vision product. We also have X-ray that has basically, you can see like for like the data. So very often we'll sit in a meeting with CEOs or executives or C-suite, and they say, well, we deal with Moody's and Standard & Poor's and Fitch, and they're international rating agencies. We don't need to use your data because, where did you get your data from? So within seconds, we click on the button, we say, this is the page number where we got this data from, and this is your number. And they say, but this data is not correct, right? And it's like, but you reported it. You are responsible for that data because you're a publicly listed institution. If you put that data in there, you're accountable for it. So otherwise, then you mustn't put it in there. If you put it on your website,
Your board members, that's what they get paid for. They must check. This is their data. It's their reputation. It's their brand, right? And you got to hold everyone accountable. It has to be no different strokes for different folks. Because if my data is incorrect and if your data is incorrect, I also want to see your data that was incorrect and you published it. It's fair, right? And it keeps everyone equal. In terms of the pathways, also in terms of how do we measure the changes in terms of climate change, all our data is location-based, right? Because I want to know what is Standard Bank. So Standard Bank in South Africa has a very different rating from Stanbic in Botswana, because it has a different board, it has a different governance structure, but also the amounts of natural capital it's using and financing in Botswana is very different from that of South Africa. So group data versus location-based data is extremely important, so the ratings are different. Because you'll find that Absa Bank has a great rating in South Africa, hypothetically, but in Kenya, the rating is very poor. Nestle, very, very interesting example, as well as Unilever. Unilever CEOs were very, very upset with us because they had brilliant ratings internationally. And when you looked at Unilever in Nigeria, no reporting on ESG factors, nothing on environmental. I mean, this is an oil and gas country, right, that you are living in and you are operating in. Where's your data? So you can't arbitrage the data based on our tool, which is great. So it helps you to be able to use location-based information. Yeah? So no proxy data.
Thank you so much. I think are we going to go to our online audience? Are there any questions from that side? Okay, right, we're well on time. Thank you very much. Right, okay. I want to call to the stage now Prof. Ben Marks, the Director of the School of Accounting, for closing remarks. Thanks, Prof.
Thank you, Marie's Program Director, our Dean, Prof. C.A. Tankiso Moloi. It's a great honor to say that, and it's a joy. Our esteemed guest, Dr. Anushka, and the family of accounting, and then all our guests that's here. We thought it was so insightful. I mean, it was telling, I mean, ESG is it's not a buzzword, but people quite often use ESG as a buzzword, and you showed us how it's real, and how it's topical, but also combining technology with what you've done. It's really insightful, and it's really leading and cutting edge, giving us a model. I'm an auditor by nature, that's why I asked the question, because always being skeptical, people window dressing, how do you measure, how do you account for it? And you built the model, but I think that the value that's created through this is, when you were talking about carbon credits, and the value for Africa, I was thinking maybe there's a way that we can find the 60 billion we're looking for the budget here, the carbon credits. So, but thank you for your deepness. I'm trying to find the right words, but you're a true scholar, a true expert on what you do. And I mean, it stands for that values that we stand here. And I hope, and I'm looking at congratulating the department and HOD and everybody involved in the initiative, and I think you will. We professors of practice and excelling in what we do is something I think we must definitely explore to leverage all your experience and all your expertise and make that real, because UJ is also leading, and School of Accounting is leading in environmental ESG through the research that's being done. And I can see great partnerships evolving, because ESG is real. And I mean, I've just realized that in business, if you're not complying, you can't do business with Europe. I mean, it's a reality. It is, and it's going to get more, and it's going to get real. We'll see what happens with America, and but Europe is an important player, and it might become even more so. So thank you for your time. Thank you for coming to share with us. Prof. Eiter made my job very easy, because he was summarizing, so I'll just refer to his deep summary of this insightful lecture. But keep doing the great work. I'm looking forward to reading your your PhD. And I was thinking, you're looking at listed companies, but a lot of companies are now delisting. And how that's impacting. I mean, I was thinking, reading up this morning about Barlow's and they delisting. And it will be interesting, because quite often companies are delisting not to be in the public eye. And it would be interesting to explore that going forward. But thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Thanks for real insight. Thanks for the MOU of the department. Thanks for the great work you do in the department, HOD, deputy HODs. I think Lulama is smiling. She's doing a PhD. I'm quite sure she's talking. She's almost finished here. But this is also an area for research going forward. And it's real and it's topical. Yeah, we're looking forward to many more interactions. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Prof. Ben. And now I call our HOD for Commercial Accounting, Ms. Boitumelo Kuzwayo.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to greet you in the name of thinking with your heart and being green, in Anushka's words. My name is Boitumelo Kuzwayo, and I'm the head of department at the Department of Commercial Accounting. My job is relatively easy, just to thank everyone who's come today. I'd like to give context around the genesis of this relationship with Risk Insights. I was actually reflecting about it. We met about a year ago through our professor of practice, Alta Prinsloo. So she shared an email. We had coffee facilitated by Mari, and we're discussing different things because over the past 3 years that she's been our professor of practice, we've had different public lectures, including one with Prof. Mervyn King. And she said, you know, there's this company, Risk Insights. I'd like to get you in touch with them. And we were speaking around some of our colleagues' research topics, so sustainability, integrated reporting. And she said, there's a lady I know, Anushka, Risk Insights, I'm going to send an email. And she sent an introductory email, and this is where we are almost a year later. So we've met numerous times online with Anushka, Andre, as well as Veronica. And I can safely say, as DCA, we are not looking back. And we are very grateful to Alta in her absentia for actually connecting us with you. So we look forward to working with you and your team. So that's just the context I wanted to give around that. Following our meetings, as I do to my bosses, so my former boss last year, Vanessa van Dijk, sitting there, I would call and be like, Vanessa, there's an MOU coming through, please can you actually look at it? I was on her back, I was on corporate governance back, because we want to make this relationship work. We understand the value of having such a symbiotic relationship with Risk Insights and the value that it can bring to not only the university, but in improving research and upskilling as well our academics within the institution to make sure we continue to be leaders within research in Africa. So thank you so much. Thank you to Vanessa for always last year taking my calls around the MOU, to Prof. Ben as well in his role as acting dean last year, for supporting this MOU and for continuing to support it in your current role, as well as to Prof. Dankiso, who has actually helped as well this year. I'm glad I could facilitate a reunion between yourself and Anushka, and I hope there'll be more interactions into the future. This event wouldn't be possible without a few people. I'd like to first thank the Risk Insights team, so to Anushka, Andre, and Veronica, and Katia. Thank you so much for working with us as part of organizing this event. Following the MOU last year, I said it's actually quite important for people to know about Risk Insights. So every time we meet with Anushka, I and the team, so we always have a debriefing like, yo, she shared so much knowledge. She's really someone that we can't keep to ourselves. She has to be known by others because we believe in sharing information and not necessarily hogging it. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to have you to speak to us and to share the insights that you have. From the University of Johannesburg, Prof. Ben, thank you so much for actually making sure this happens. So we have to send a memo to actually be in this particular venue. Thank you, Prof. Dankiso, for supporting it. There's a lot of hoops we need to jump through to bring you to this venue. To the team at Ubuntu Chambers, thank you so much. To Mari as well for facilitating everything in terms of with the team, with Risk Insights, thank you so much. I call them L squared. Lerato Mabanga as well as Lerato Tsukulu. They help from a marketing perspective as well as the administration. To Temba Masango as well as Gail Edie for also helping us to prepare for today. To the ushers that you met and who brought you here, thank you so much to them who are our peer mentors. And to Hirsch and the UJ TV team, thank you for being here to help us live stream it, to help us be connected because this room is quite limited, but we want that knowledge to be shared abroad and with everyone who can actually join today. So thank you so much. To Noktula, for our photographer, thank you for capturing the moments during the session. And to our energetic, ever optimistic MC, Maurice, thank you so much. You're great. And to the audience, you know, I always say a public lecture isn't public if it doesn't touch all touch points that exist within our society. And we're looking at the guest list and the people in the room, as well as people joining us online. There's people from government, there's people from business. And as Prof. Eita was saying, it is really something that speaks to all of it's multidisciplinary. So I think one thing we've proved today as accountants is that we're not boring. We managed to bring a few people into the room who are not accountants, and we can still all have a conversation together. So thank you so much to the audience for making the time, for fighting through traffic, fighting through all the traffic to make it here by 9, and for gracing us with your presence. I really hope it has been insightful, you've enjoyed the session, and you will continue to join us in various sessions that we invite you to in the future. To Anushka, I say she's dynamite comes in small packages. Dynamite comes in small packages, but today and every day when I engage with her, I can say that she's ESG personified. She literally lives ESG, and thank you so much. She has health issues, but she still makes it here. We came and we said, do you want to sit? I was like, no, I have to stand. So thank you for the sacrifices that you've made to be here, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think one thing she also touched on in what she spoke about is leadership and servant leadership. And the one thing she really highlighted is that you don't need to be a leader to serve within a country. I think in our different roles, in whatever we do, we need to be leaders and servants as part of ensuring that we make an impact in the different spheres and rooms that we walk in. So thank you for epitomizing that and encouraging us to actually continue doing that. Thank you. On behalf of the department, we'd like to give you a small token of appreciation. Okay, so this one and one at the back. So no, these two. And this one. And put that one on the floor. So on behalf of the Department of Commercial Accounting, we'd like to say a small thank you with these two. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, here we go.
No, don't worry.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that is so beautiful.
The battle of the vertically challenged.
The heel.
It's the heels, yes, it is the heels. Don't be fooled by my height. But also what Anushka mentioned earlier on around SLPs. This is one of the key strategic things that we have been working on together with Risk Insights and the Department of Commercial Accounting. We're working on launching short learning programs, both at executive levels as well as to lower management, to actually capacitate people within their various fields on ESG. So please be on the lookout. Please follow us on our different social platforms. We are available on LinkedIn, as well as Instagram and Facebook. Risk Insights is also available on those various platforms. Please follow us so that you can actually see what it is that's going on. And as said, we continue to working with you and growing the knowledge around ESG, because I think it's really, at this point in time, there's a lot of stuff that people are unconsciously incompetent about. And these short learning programs will, I think, enable people to transition from that into being consciously incompetent and then competent. And consciously competent, yes, thank you. So we are very excited as a department, as a school, as well as the college with these short learning programs. And they won't only be for bean counters or accountants. They will touch on different touch points. So please be on the lookout for that. I'd also like to thank the audience online for joining us. I hope there's people joining us from different parts of South Africa as well as Africa. So it's good to see that it actually is reaching different people around the world. So thank you so much for joining us today. And the recording will be available on YouTube. We will share it. It will be available on our various social media platforms. So thank you so much. And I'd like to bring the session to a close. As Prof. Dankiso mentioned earlier on, I don't want him to faint. So please, everyone in the room, there's some eats to the other side. Please continue to socialize and mingle. But thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Well done.